"Does anyone object to this marriage?" asked the pastor. The freed slave cried out, and everyone was shocked by the revelation. Henry McAllister was going to marry a bride arranged by his father. But his great love, Sarah, the slave, now free, appeared beautiful in her dress and prevented the ceremony from continuing. The Baptist church in Magnolia Springs was packed that June morning in 1863. Ladies of Southern high society waved their lace fans as the sweltering Alabama heat streamed through the open windows. All eyes were on the altar, where Henry McAllister awaited his bride, Charlotte Pemberton, daughter of the region's largest cotton merchant. Henry was 28 years old, with deep blue eyes and a divided heart. His father, Colonel William McAllister, had arranged the marriage to save the family plantation from mounting debts caused by the Civil War. Charlotte would bring a generous dowry and powerful connections. It was the perfect marriage on paper. But Henry could barely breathe. His fingers trembled as he adjusted his tie for the 10th time. Pastor Jeremiah Thompson, a man with a grey beard and kind eyes, watched the groom with concern. He had known Henry since childhood and noticed that something was troubling the young man. "Is everything all right, my son?" whispered the pastor. Henry didn't answer. His thoughts were miles away, in a small cabin near the creek, where 3 years ago he had met true love, Sarah. The name echoed in his mind like a prayer and a curse at the same time. Sarah was the daughter of Mama Ruth, the McAllister family cook. Her brown eyes shone with a rare intelligence, and her voice, when she sang hymns on Sundays at the slaves' church, seemed to touch heaven itself. Henry had fallen in love against all the rules, against all of society, against everything he had been taught was right. "I love her, Lord," Henry murmured in his nightly prayers. "How could it be wrong to love a soul that you created with such perfection?" For 2 years they met secretly. Henry taught Sarah to read using the Bible, sharing Christ's words about love and equality. Sarah shared with him her unwavering faith, the faith that sustained her people through chains and suffering. "Jesus was whipped and humiliated," she said, holding Henry's hands. "If he endured it for the love of humanity, I can endure it. Our faith will set us free, Henry. You'll see." But Colonel McAllister found out. One night, his foreman, the cruel Silas Blackwood, saw the two together. The scandal was hushed up, but punishment came swiftly. Sarah was sold to a plantation in Mississippi the following morning, torn from her mother's arms amid screams. Henry pleaded, cried, and threatened to desert. His father was adamant. "Will you bring shame to the McAllister name? That black woman has bewitched you. Thank God I didn't have her whipped before selling her." That night, Henry knelt in his room and wept until he had no more tears. "Lord, if you exist, protect Sarah. Forgive me for my weakness, for not being man enough to save her." A year passed in agony. Henry tried to find her, but the Mississippi was vast, and the slave buyers wouldn't reveal information. The war intensified. And then came his father's ultimatum. "You will marry Charlotte Pemberton or be disinherited. Choose, Henry, your childish fantasy or your duty to your family." Now, standing at the altar, Henry felt like he was dying inside. He had agreed to the marriage out of desperation, out of exhaustion, out of the belief that Sarah was lost forever. But with each chime of the bell announcing the bride's arrival, his heart screamed her name. The church doors opened. Charlotte Pemberton entered in her elaborate white dress, the veil covering her pale face. The wedding march began. Henry closed his eyes and prayed for strength. "Lord," she prayed silently, "forgive me for this lie I am about to live." What Henry didn't know was that a carriage had just stopped outside the church, and out of it stepped a woman who would change everything. 15 months earlier, in Mississippi, Sarah would wake before dawn at the Whitmore plantation, her body aching after 16 hours picking cotton under the scorching sun. The chains on her ankles had left marks that would never fade, physical reminders of a prison that went far beyond the body. "Get up, you lazy black woman!" Foreman Reynolds' shout echoed through the barracks. His whip cracked in the air like a constant warning. Sarah stood up, but her lips moved in silent prayer. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Faith was all she had left. Every night, when the chains were finally removed, Sarah knelt on the hard-packed earth and talked to God. "Lord, I know you haven't forgotten me. I know Henry prays for me too. Keep the flame of our love alive until justice prevails." But justice seemed distant. Nathan Whitmore, the plantation owner, was known for his cruelty. Unlike Colonel McAllister, who at least maintained a facade of Christianity, Whitmore took pride in his brutality. "Slaves have no soul," he declared during dinners. "They are property, just like cattle. To treat them gently is a waste." Sarah witnessed horrors that haunted her. Families torn apart, children ripped from their mothers, men whipped unconscious for imaginary offenses, and she herself was not immune. When she refused Reynolds' advances, the foreman made her work the hottest hours without water, hoping to break her. But something extraordinary happened. Another enslaved person, an elderly man named Isaac, noticed Sarah's suffering. He had been a preacher before being captured and sold, and he kept the faith alive among his people through secret nightly meetings. "Daughter," Isaac told her after a secret prayer meeting in the fields, "God has a purpose for your pain." Joseph was sold into slavery and became governor of Egypt. Moses freed his people. Christ endured the cross. You too will see liberation. Sarah clung to those words. And then, in September 1862, rumors began to circulate. President Lincoln had signed something called the Emancipation Proclamation. Freedom was coming to the Confederate States. "Is it true, Isaac?" Sarah asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Men's laws change, daughter. But God's law has always been clear. We are all equal before Him. Prepare yourself. Freedom will come, but you will have to fight for it." The following months were chaotic. War was closing in on the Mississippi. Union soldiers marched through the South, liberating plantations. Whitmore grew furious and paranoid, increasing security and punishments. Sarah knew she needed to act. One night in January 1863, during a violent storm, she and 12 other enslaved people escaped. Isaac led the group along a route he had memorized for years, following the stars and the secret signs left by other fugitives. It was 3 weeks of terror. Slave hunters with dogs pursued their trail. They slept in swamps, ate roots, crossed icy rivers. 2 of the group did not survive. But Sarah continued, driven by a force that could only be divine. "Henry," she whispered on the darkest nights, "I'm coming back to you. God is my witness." They finally reached Tennessee, where they found a Union encampment. The commanding officer, Captain Joshua Bennett, was a devout Christian from Massachusetts and a staunch abolitionist. "You are free now," he declared with tears in his eyes. "Free by right, free by law, free in the eyes of God." Sarah fell to her knees and wept. She wept for her mother, who was still in Alabama. She wept for those who had died in the escape. She wept with relief and with pain. And she wept with hope. "Captain Bennett," she said after composing herself, "I need to go to Alabama. I need to go home." "It's dangerous," he warned. "Alabama is still Confederate territory." But he looked at the young woman, her eyes full of determination, and saw something special. "If God is calling you back, who am I to stop Him?" The wedding march filled the Baptist church in Magnolia Springs. Charlotte Pemberton walked slowly down the aisle, her white silk dress trailing on the polished wooden floor. Guests smiled and whispered approvingly. It was the wedding of the year. But Henry McAllister felt nauseous. His hands were visibly trembling. Pastor Thompson watched with growing concern as Charlotte finally reached the altar and stood beside the groom. "Beloved brothers and sisters," the pastor began, his voice echoing off the walls, "we are gathered here in the sight of God to unite in holy matrimony, Henry McAllister and Charlotte Pemberton." Henry wasn't listening to the words. His mind was elsewhere, in another time. He remembered Sarah reciting Proverbs 31 while he taught her to read. "A virtuous woman, who can find her? Her worth is far above rubies." "If anyone knows of any impediment," the pastor continued, "let them speak now or forever hold their peace." A heavy silence fell over the congregation. It was the ceremonial moment, always devoid of real meaning. No one ever interrupted a wedding. But then, the church doors burst open with a bang. All heads turned. The hot Alabama summer wind swept into the sanctuary. There, in the sunlight-drenched doorway, stood a woman. She wore a simple yet elegant light blue dress, the kind a free woman from the north would wear. Her hair was styled in an elaborate bun, adorned with wildflowers. She was black, and her presence in a white southern church was shocking in itself. But it wasn't his skin color that brought Henry McAllister to his knees. "Sarah," the word escaped her lips like a cry and a prayer, "I oppose this marriage." Sarah's voice echoed through the church with divine authority. Chaos erupted. The society ladies screamed in outrage. Charlotte Pemberton let out a shriek of horror. Colonel McAllister rose furiously from his bench. "Guards, arrest this black woman! How dare she enter here?" But Sarah was already walking down the hallway, her head held high, her eyes fixed on Henry. Two women, one white and one black, walked beside her as escorts. "I have the right to be here," Sarah declared, her voice firm. "And I have the right to stop this ceremony, because Henry McAllister is not free to marry." The silence was now absolute. Even the colonel was paralyzed by the audacity of the statement. "What are you talking about, woman?" roared the colonel, regaining his voice. "My son never married." "Not before the law of men," Sarah replied, now standing at the altar, a few feet from Henry. Their eyes met, and years of longing passed between them in a single glance. "But before God, we are married." Gasps of horror echoed. Charlotte Pemberton fainted in her maid of honor's arms. Pastor Thompson gripped the pulpit for balance. "That's impossible," shouted Colonel McAllister. "Blasphemy. She's a slave, property that's been sold. There can be no marriage." "But there was," said a new voice. The white woman who had accompanied Sarah stepped forward. She was tall, middle-aged, with kind but determined eyes. "My name is Abigail Foster. I'm a Baptist missionary from Boston, and I was the one who officiated the ceremony that united Henry McAllister and Sarah Ruth 3 years ago on the banks of Silver Creek under the watchful eye of God." The church erupted in indignant voices, but Abigail continued, holding up a document. "I have here the marriage certificate, signed by me as an ordained minister and witnessed by Isaac Freeman and Mama Ruth. It may not have legal value in the Confederate South, but before God and before the Church of Christ, this marriage is valid and sacred." Henry was standing now, tears streaming freely down his face. "Sarah, you're alive. You're here." "I am free, Henry," she said softly. "The Emancipation Proclamation set me free, and I have come to reclaim what is mine, not as property but as a wife, as an equal, as a creature of God." Colonel McAllister surged forward furiously. "This is a farce. I don't recognize any ceremony conducted in secret with a slave. Henry, compose yourself immediately." But something had changed in Henry. He looked at his father, then at Charlotte, then back at Sarah. And for the first time in his life, he chose. "Father," he said, his voice breaking but firm, "I have sinned. I have sinned against Sarah by not defending her when you sold her. I have sinned against God by agreeing to this lie of marriage today, but I will sin no more." He turned to Charlotte, who had regained consciousness. "Miss Pemberton, I beg your pardon. You deserve a man who truly loves you. I cannot be that man. My heart has always belonged to another." And then, in front of the scandalized society of Magnolia Springs, Henry McAllister walked up to Sarah and took her hands. "But there's more," Sarah said, her tears finally falling. "Something you need to know, something everyone needs to know." "There's a child," Sarah said, her voice echoing through the silent church. "A daughter. Our daughter." If the previous chaos had been great, now it was absolute. Women fainted, men screamed, the scandal reached biblical proportions. Colonel McAllister turned as white as a ghost. Henry was paralyzed, processing the words. "A daughter." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Her name is Grace McAllister. She's 2.5 years old. She was born on the Whitmore plantation 3 months after I was sold." "Where is she?" Henry asked desperately, looking around as if the child might magically appear. The second woman accompanying Sarah, the black woman, stepped forward. It was Mama Ruth, Sarah's mother, older and tired, but with eyes shining with tears of joy. "She's out there with me, Henry," Mama Ruth said, her voice breaking. "I didn't want to bring her inside until I was sure it was safe. But she exists, she's real, and she's your daughter." Henry staggered, leaning against the altar. Pastor Thompson held him by the arm. The old pastor had tears in his eyes as well. "Colonel," said the pastor, turning to William McAllister, "you have a granddaughter, a child of your own blood." "That's outrageous," the colonel exclaimed, but his voice had lost some of its force. "Even if it's true, that child she's a McAllister," Sarah finished fiercely. "And I won't let your shame about my skin color tarnish her purity. Grace is innocent. She didn't ask to be born into this divided world, but she's here, and she deserves to know her father." "I need to see her," Henry said, his voice breaking. "Now, please, Sarah, let me see my daughter." Sarah waved to Mama Ruth, who turned and went to the door. Moments later, she returned carrying a small child. The girl was about 2 years old, with light brown skin, golden brown curls, and the same piercing blue eyes as Henry McAllister. The silence in the church was sepulchral. Even the most indignant could not deny what they saw. The child was the perfect image of the mixture of its parents. "Grace," Sarah called softly, stretching out her arms. Mama Ruth brought the little girl and placed her in her mother's arms. Henry approached slowly, as if he feared it was all a dream that would vanish at the slightest touch. He looked at that small face, those eyes that mirrored his own. "Hello, Grace," he whispered. I am your daddy." The child looked at him curiously, then smiled. A bright, innocent smile that simultaneously broke and rebuilt Henry's heart. "Daddy," Grace repeated, extending her little hands toward him. Henry couldn't hold back any longer. He sobbed openly, taking the child in his arms for the first time, hugging her as if he would never let her go again. "Forgive me," he cried. "Forgive me for not being there. Forgive me for not protecting you and your mother." It was then that Abigail Foster, the missionary, took another step forward. She was holding another document. "There is something more this congregation needs to know," she announced. "I didn't come merely as the minister who officiated at Henry and Sarah's secret wedding. I came as a messenger of truth." She looked directly at Colonel McAllister. "Colonel, you sold Sarah to the Whitmore plantation knowing that she was married to your son before God. But there's something you didn't know." The colonel frowned. "What are you talking about, woman?" "Sarah wasn't the only child Mama Ruth had," Abigail continued. 30 years ago, when Mama Ruth was 19, she was forced by the plantation owner at the time, Colonel McAllister's father, to have relations with him. A son was born from that violence. Mama Ruth began to cry silently. Sarah held her mother's hand tightly. "That baby was taken from her at birth," Abigail continued, Mama Ruth was told the child had died, but it didn't die. The baby was given to a poor white family to raise as their own because it had light enough skin to pass for white. Colonel McAllister's heart began to race. He knew where this story was going, and the terror in his eyes was evident. That baby grew up without knowing his true origins, Abigail said. He married, had a son, and lived his life as a white man of McAllister lineage. His name was Thomas Crawford. No, the colonel whispered. Yes, Abigail confirmed. Thomas Crawford was Mama Ruth's half-brother, which means, Colonel McAllister, that your late wife, Martha Crawford McAllister, had black blood. And that means you do too, Henry. The church exploded again. The scandal was now inconceivable. Colonel William McAllister, a pillar of Southern society and defender of white supremacy, discovered that his own son had African ancestry. Henry was stunned, still holding Grace. He looked at Mama Ruth, who nodded through her tears. "That's right, young Henry," she said softly. "Your maternal grandmother was my mother too. We're family. We always have been." How did you find all this out?" the colonel demanded of Abigail, his voice trembling. "Because I was the one who cared for Thomas Crawford in his final days," Abigail replied. "Before he died, he told me the truth he discovered too late. He asked me to find Mama Ruth and reveal everything. It took me years, but I finally found her. And I discovered that the injustice had been repeated. Sarah, Mama Ruth's daughter, had been separated from her true love." Pastor Thompson stepped forward, his voice pastoral but firm. "Colonel McAllister, you have spent years defending racial segregation, proclaiming superiority, justifying slavery. But God has just revealed that this division is a lie. We are all one blood, one humanity created in the image of God." The colonel collapsed onto his seat, completely devastated. The Baptist church remained in tense silence for long minutes. Colonel William McAllister was hunched over his pew, his face hidden in his hands. Decades of pride, certainties, and prejudices crumbled like sandcastles before the tide of truth. Henry was still holding Grace, the little girl nestled in his arms. Sarah was beside him, and Mama Ruth watched them with tears of relief and pain mixed together. It was Pastor Jeremiah Thompson who finally broke the silence. The old minister stepped up to the pulpit, his hands trembling slightly as he held his battered Bible. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "we are witnessing something the prophets foretold. A moment where secrets are brought to light and where God's justice prevails over the injustices of men." He opened the Bible to Galatians. Hear the words of the Apostle Paul. "There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." Today, the pastor continued, we were confronted with an uncomfortable truth. The family that considered itself pure superior discovered that it carries the same blood as those it oppressed. And do you know what this teaches us? That God has a divine sense of humor. He shows us that all our divisions are artificial, created by human pride, not by celestial design. Colonel McAllister lifted his head. His face was wet with tears, something no one in that church had ever seen before. "Pastor," his voice came out hoarse, broken, "what have I done, Almighty God, what have I done?" It was Sarah who answered. She approached the bench where the colonel was seated, standing before him with imposing dignity. "You sold your son's love like it was cattle," she said calmly. "You separated my daughter from her father. You denied your own granddaughter. And you did all this while sitting on this bench every Sunday, singing hymns and proclaiming your faith." The colonel couldn't look her in the eye, but Sarah continued, "But I learned something in the cotton fields, in the chains, in the night escapes. I learned that the God I serve is greater than the hatred of men. I learned that Christ forgave his tormentors even while nailed to the cross, and I learned that holding a grudge is just another form of slavery." She took a deep breath. "Then I forgive you, Colonel McAllister. Not for you, but for myself. because I will no longer bear your chains." The colonel completely broke down, sobbing. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I deserve nothing but condemnation. None of us deserve God's grace," Pastor Thompson said gently, "but he gives it to us anyway. The question is, what will we do with it?" Henry approached his father, still holding Grace. The child looked curiously at the weeping man. "Father," Henry said, his voice firm but not harsh, "for years I was a coward. I loved Sarah in secret, but I didn't have the courage to defend our love publicly. I allowed you to sell her. I agreed to this sham marriage. I also sinned." He knelt beside his father. "But today, before God and this congregation, I choose differently. I choose Sarah. I choose our daughter. I choose love over pride, truth over convenience, faith over fear." The colonel looked at his son, then at the granddaughter he had never met, then at Sarah. For long moments, decades of conditioning battled against the reality before him. Finally, with trembling hands, he reached out to Grace. Can I hold her?" Henry looked at Sarah, who nodded. Carefully, Henry handed the girl to her grandfather. Grace looked at the colonel with her big blue eyes, the same eyes as him, the same eyes as Henry. And then she did something extraordinary. She touched the old man's tear-wet face and said, "Don't cry, Grandpa." Those two simple words completed what no sermon or argument could. The colonel embraced his granddaughter and wept as he had never wept in his life. "Forgive me," he whispered to the child. "Forgive this foolish old man." Mama Ruth then approached, placing a hand on the colonel's shoulder. "Your father took my baby from me 30 years ago, Colonel. I've carried that pain every day since then. But today, seeing you hold your granddaughter, seeing you broken and repentant, I too choose forgiveness, because that's what Jesus taught us." Pastor Thompson returned to the pulpit. "So let me ask a different question now. Not does anyone oppose this marriage, but does anyone support the union that God has already accomplished?" There was silence. The society of Magnolia Springs was too shocked to react. But then a voice rose. "I support it." It was Charlotte Pemberton. She had composed herself and was standing, her bridal veil removed. "I came here today expecting a loveless marriage based only on convenience, but I witnessed something greater. True love, courage, and redemption. Henry McAllister was never mine, he was always Sarah's." She approached Sarah and, to everyone's shock, took her hands. "You are nobler than I could ever be. Take good care of him. He loves you in a way I could only dream of being loved." One by one, other voices joined in. Abigail Foster and the members of her abolitionist mission, some of the enslaved people who worked at the church, and then, surprisingly, some of the younger white members of the congregation. "It's time for a change," said a young farmer. "This war is tearing our nation apart. Maybe God is showing us a different path." Colonel McAllister stood, still holding Grace. He looked at the congregation. "I was a foolish and proud man. I defended the indefensible. I justified the unjustifiable, but no more." Her voice grew stronger. "This is my granddaughter, Grace McAllister, and she is as much a McAllister as I am, or my son. Sarah is Henry's wife before God. And from now on, anyone who disrespects my daughter-in-law or my granddaughter will have to answer to me." It was a transformative moment. Not perfect, not complete, but a beginning. The church remained divided, half scandalized, half amazed, all transformed by what they witnessed. Pastor Thompson raised his hands. "Therefore, by the authority vested in me by God and this church, I recognize the marriage of Henry McAllister and Sarah Ruth. What God has joined together, let no man separate." He looked at the couple. "Henry, you can kiss your wife again." Henry and Sarah turned to face each other. Tears streamed freely down both their faces. There, at the altar where he should have married another, Henry took Sarah in his arms and kissed her with all the passion, pain, and promise of years apart. Grace, in her grandfather's arms, clapped her hands and shouted, "Mommy! Daddy!" And for the first time in 3 years, Sarah felt that she was truly at home. 6 months had passed since that extraordinary day at the Magnolia Springs Baptist Church. The autumn of 1863 painted Alabama in golden hues, and profound changes blew like the wind through the trees. The Civil War continued to rage northward, but on the McAllister estate a different revolution was taking place. Colonel William McAllister had freed all the enslaved people who worked on his land, not because the law still required him to in Alabama, but because he could no longer look at Mama Ruth or any other enslaved person without seeing his own hypocrisy reflected back. "I can't undo 30 years of sin overnight," he had told Pastor Thompson, "but I can start living differently today." Henry and Sarah now lived in the main house, something unthinkable 6 months earlier. The change hadn't been easy. Half of Magnolia Springs high society avoided them completely. Dinner invitations ceased, old friendships cooled, but something new was growing in its place. Sarah sat in what had once been the Colonel's office, teaching a group of children, white, black, and mixed race, to read using the Bible. It was the school she had dreamed of creating, a place where there were no chains, only books. "Love your neighbor as yourself," a 7-year-old black girl read carefully. "Miss Sarah, does that mean all the neighbors?" "It means everyone, dear," Sarah replied with a smile. "Jesus didn't discriminate based on color, position, or anything else. He loved everyone." Grace sat on her mother's lap, absorbing everything. At almost 3 years old now, she was the living bridge between two worlds, the symbol of the possibility of reconciliation. Henry entered the room, carrying firewood for the fireplace. He had changed a great deal in those months. His shoulders, once hunched by the weight of cowardice, were now straight. His eyes held a peace they had never possessed before. "The harvests are coming in well," he told Sarah after the children left. "With the free workers receiving wages, they work with more dedication. Who would have thought that treating people with dignity would be good for business?" Sarah laughed. That sound Henry had missed during those empty years. "Just imagine. It's almost as if God knew what he was doing." They were interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Abigail Foster, the missionary who had been instrumental in reuniting the family. "I have news," she said seriously. "The Emancipation Proclamation is spreading. More plantations are freeing enslaved people. But there is violent resistance as well. Some masters are hiding the news, keeping people in captivity illegally." "What can we do?" Henry asked. "Continue being a light in the darkness," Abigail replied. "Your story has spread, you know. Other interracial couples are finding the courage to come out of the shadows. Your school is inspiring others. Change is slow, but it's happening." That evening, the family gathered for dinner. Something that would have been impossible before. Colonel McAllister sat at the head of the table, but the man who sat there was different from the proud patriarch of months ago. "Grace," he called to his granddaughter, "come here and let Grandpa see you recite the verse you learned today." The girl ran to him, climbing onto his lap familiarly. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." "Perfect, my dear," the colonel said, kissing her forehead. He looked at Sarah. "You are an exceptional teacher. This girl will read better than I did when she's 5 years old." "She has good genes," Sarah said with a gentle smile. Mama Ruth served dinner, not because she was forced to, but because cooking was her art, and now she was paid for it. She sat at the table with them, something that still made her cry from time to time. 30 years, she said softly. "I waited 30 years to sit at the table with the family I helped raise, and now here I am with my daughter, my son-in-law, my granddaughter, and yes, even with you, William." The colonel nodded, too emotional to speak. After dinner, Henry and Sarah strolled through the garden under the stars, Grace asleep in her father's arms. "Have you ever regretted it?" Henry asked softly. "Coming back, choosing me, facing all of this?" Sarah stopped, turning to face him in the moonlight. Do you remember what I told you years ago when we used to meet secretly by the creek? You said that Jesus was whipped and humiliated, but endured it out of love. Henry reminded him. I said our faith would set us free, Sarah continued. And it did, Henry. Not in the way I imagined, not without pain, not without cost. But it set us free. You are free from fear. I am free from chains. Your father is free from the lie he lived, and Grace will grow up free from the hatred that poisoned generations. She touched his face. It was worth every tear, every moment of terror, every lonely night. Because it brought us here to this moment, where I can be under the stars with my husband and daughter, without hiding, without shame, without fear. Henry kissed her gently, careful not to wake Grace. I love you, Sarah McAllister. I'm a better man for loving you. And I love you, Henry McAllister, she replied. You found your courage, and together we will raise our daughter in a better world than the one we were born into. That night, before going to sleep, Henry wrote in his diary, something he had been doing so that Grace could one day read it. December 19th, 1863. Dearest Grace, if you are reading this in the future, know that your existence is proof of the power of love over hate. You were born into a world that said your birth was impossible, improper, wrong. But God does not see as men see. He looks at the heart. Your mother is the bravest woman I have ever known. She endured chains, separation, injustice, and yet maintained her faith, her dignity, her capacity to forgive. Learn from her. Your grandfather was a man broken by the truth, but he is being rebuilt by grace. Learn that it's never too late for change. And I, your father, learned that true love requires courage. It's not enough to love in secret. Love must be proclaimed, defended, fought for. The world is still divided, my dear. This war may end, but the war in people's hearts will continue. You will face challenges I cannot foresee, but carry this with you. You are loved, you are precious, you are a child of God. And no man, no law, no prejudice can take that away from you. May you grow to be as strong as your mother, as repentant as your grandfather, and braver than I ever was. And may you live to see the day when stories like ours are no longer necessary, because humanity will finally learn what Christ taught, that we are all one. Henry closed the diary and looked at Sarah, sleeping peacefully beside him, Grace in her crib nearby. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Outside, the stars shone over Alabama, indifferent to the human divisions below. And somewhere up north, soldiers marched toward a liberation that would change everything. But in the McAllister household, liberation had already arrived. Not through proclamations or battles, but through the love, forgiveness, and courage of ordinary people making extraordinary choices. And perhaps, just perhaps, that would be enough to begin healing a broken world. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith, courage, and love that transform. Share this message of hope with those who need to know that love always wins. Leave a comment telling us which part moved you the most. God bless you.